Well, it seems like it's been a little while since we've done an Indiana neighbor, and the one we're doing today grew up in Lagodi and is still our Indiana neighbor, but it's been a while since he's been here. And if you don't know him, you may know some of his writings in the Lagodi Tribune and even other papers that we'll talk about life growing up in Lagodi. And it's Gordon Grindstaff. Gordon, thanks for coming down. Your location these days is where?
Indianapolis.
Indianapolis.
And thanks for asking me.
Oh, you're welcome. I love this because, as I said, I think the era that you grew up in, I know I kind of said kind of Norman Rockwell-ish, maybe not so much, but just interesting.
Yeah.
Really interesting. Yeah.
It was interesting.
Yeah. And your stories maybe embellish some, but they make it even more interesting. That's for sure. We'll find out how much embellished they are as we go along here, I'm sure. But let's just start, as we normally do, Gordon, from the beginning. Tell me where you were born, a little bit about your parents.
Okay. I was born in Lagodi, actually, in my grandmother's home on Grant Street.
On Grant Street, all right.
We just, actually, I just drove by there. There's a mobile home there.
Yeah, I know exactly that's where you were born.
There used to be a railroad.
Just right up the road from where we are at the library.
Yeah, there was a railroad track ran right in front of it for, I don't know what it I think it went down to some manufacturing place that was there.
Why your grandma's house?
You know, I don't really know. We lived in Shoals, actually, at the time.
Oh, okay.
Or my mom and dad did.
Okay.
Doc Lett was over here.
Yep. Doc Lett delivered me.
Did he really?
Most people in town around my age and even your age. But he must have been a young doctor then.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
But he came to the house.
One of the early ones.
He came to the house, and did back then, was there even a doctor's office to go to? Did Dr. Lett have an office?
Honestly, he had a car, I guess.
Yeah, will travel. Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It was, well, some years ago I went back to get a passport, and we were going to Europe with my brother. And I didn't have a birth certificate. I guess he had been tired and he didn't have the time to go log it. I went over to Shoals to the county and got these big books out and thumbed through them, and I saw lots of my classmates in 1940, but no me, March the 10th, there wasn't any entry at all.
So how did you work through that?
Well, I had a baptismal certificate.
Okay.
And the feds took that in place of.
Okay. Very good. Wow. So your grandparents, who were they?
My grandparents?
Yeah, who were they?
Grindstaff, obviously on one side. My mother was Edna Grindstaff, my grandmother. My grandfather died in 1926. He had tuberculosis. So,
okay.
They lived up around Dover Hill.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we come down here, I'll come down that way through Bedford. And it just is such a beautiful drive.
It is.
And I know it's not really possible, but it just feels like home when I go through there.
I'll be darned.
But after he died, my grandmother lived with my great-grandmother, who was a Kennedy. And they all lived up again in the Dover Hill area.
And what about your parents? I understand you really didn't get to know your dad, did you?
No, I was just barely 6 years old when he was killed. March 29th. I happened to open my computer and March 29th popped up.
And he was
77 years ago. He was killed in a motorcycle accident.
In this area?
Between Lagodi and Shoals. Just on that hill just east of the fairgrounds.
So 6 years old, do you remember even getting the news?
Some of it. One thing that kind of stands out is that we lived in Frog Eye. I don't know if you know Frog Eye in Shoals.
No. No.
Well, it wasn't Hollywood or anything.
It was Martin County.
Yeah, Martin County. He was a mechanic and a welder. And I found out not too long ago that he taught welding during World War II. He was in the Army. They only had one eye, and he lost an eye somewhere along the way. with a welding accident.
Oh, okay.
So,
All right. And you said it was a motorcycle accident?
yeah, he'd worked on it. It wasn't his.
Okay.
He had worked on it and took it out
I got you.
and
Mhm.
just had an accident of some kind.
So at that time, how many children did he leave behind?
Well, there was my sister Vera, my brother Ron, and my mom was pregnant with another baby. And that's another story I'll tell you.
Okay. All right. And what was your dad's name?
Dale, Marvin Dale. And I found out he was running for Republican assessor or something at the time. He was, and he was also a member of the Eagles and Shoals.
Shoals, right?
So I joined.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I thought that looked good in my obituary.
You were even thinking that back then?
I need some things to put in there.
I think you've got a few things, but let's hope it's a long time out. What about your mom? Tell me a little bit about her. Her name?
My mom's was Rosemary Kidwell.
Kidwell.
She grew up in the Bramble area,
Mm-hmm.
actually where the Crane took over their farm.
Okay.
And her mother died during childbirth, or shortly thereafter.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And how long did your mother live?
She lived to be 64. She died in 1976.
Did she remarry?
No. She had only had an 8th grade education. She moved us to Lagodi was the first thing. I started the 1st grade in Shoals. Went to the little 2-room school, I think, over in West Shoals. And then after he was killed, she moved us to Lagodi to be closer to her family.
Okay.
And she bought a house down on Dewey Street.
Yeah.
If you know Dewey.
I do know Dewey Street, sure.
It's only 2 blocks long.
Yeah. You know every street here, right?
Yeah. And that was in 1946.
Just right after the war.
Yeah.
Okay.
She took me out of school over Shoals and brought me over here to St. John's.
Mm-hmm.
And the church, well, and even the school they were so big, it just overwhelmed me.
Yeah, you don't think about that. The Lagodi School, St. John's, being so big, but when you think about that building, that probably you came from.
And there were all these women running around dressed in black.
Yeah, had habits on. Right? I mean, that had to have been a culture shock for you, right?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was,
but that's where you were just starting your school, right?
Yeah,
1946. Okay. Siblings?
My sister Vera, who I'm sure a lot of people in Lagodi know.
But I did not know Vera was your sister.
Yes, she's my sister.
Vera's Vera. We all know Vera. We did know Vera.
Vera was one of a kind.
She was one of a kind. She would tell you what she thought, wouldn't she?
Yeah. She invented zero tolerance at that restaurant.
The restaurant being, I mean, I know it's been, what was it, the Star Tavern when she was there?
It was Star Tavern when I was younger, and then 2 or 3 other people owned it.
Right.
And then she just kind of took it over.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know who she got it from. She just started fixing sandwiches there.
Oh, yeah, I remember Vera. Yeah, certainly.
And I'd come down and help her sometimes. So,
mm-hmm.
Attended bar and stuff like that.
Okay, I was going to say she probably didn't want you in the kitchen.
She was pretty hard on the help. So.
Yeah. So another one left, Gordon. Can you help me out? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Who else?
My brother Ron was a year younger than me. If he was still alive, he's the guy you probably should talk to. He was Mr. Lagodi.
You know, I put out there one time, and if I could do one of these with people in heaven, you know, who would you suggest? And I know I had so many in my own mind, but got the suggestions, and there used to be a lot more characters, I guess, or people who had stories and could tell them maybe than what we have today. But there are a lot of them who would be really interesting to talk to, wouldn't there?
Yeah.
Don't know if they would talk, but there are a lot of them that could.
He was a basketball fan like that. Probably as bad as you are, or Scott Wagner.
Oh boy, yeah. Is Scott a relative of yours?
Scott is a relative. He's the second. His mom was my first cousin.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that you get any more fanatic than Scott.
Yeah. He lived in California. He went to
Ron. You're talking about?
Yeah, Ron. He went to Purdue. when he graduated from high school, uh, we didn't have any money, and he was looking at being a travel agent. Um,
You wanted it.
and instead, Polly Ackerman, Skip Ackerman's mom,
Yeah.
she went to her sorority or something, and they got some money together and got him into Purdue.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Okay.
and he got a mechanical engineering degree, 1963. I should have got part of that. I spent a lot of time hauling him back and forth.
You should have.
He he loved coming back to Lakota. He'd come home on weekends and get a ride home, and then he wouldn't have a way back.
Yeah,
So Sunday nights I'd take off from West Lafayette.
Yeah. Any other siblings? You had,
There was the baby my mom delivered about a week after my dad died. It's stillborn.
oh, okay. Okay.
And there's some story. There's a story about that.
Yeah.
We can get to it here in a little
Okay.
while.
But you're the only one left then?
I'm the only one left. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, he died in 2010.
Okay.
And he was kind of the canary in the coal mine for me, because when he'd get something wrong with him, and then I'd get it. And even though I was a year older, 2 years older.
You talking about Ron?
Yeah, Ron. Yeah. He'd call me, I don't know, in 1991. He worked for a company, Mattel. If you're familiar with
sure.
the toy company, yeah.
That'd be fun.
Yeah. He brought our kids lots of stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, they had sent him to get a examination, yearly physical. He called me and said, "I've got prostate cancer." And I said, "I don't think it's prostrate."
No, but a lot of people do.
Yeah. Yeah. And he said, "My doctor said you better get checked." So I did, and I had.
Yeah.
And actually, my son at the same age had it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So get checked.
51.
Right. I mean, yeah.
So
Health wise, how are you?
I'm okay. I've got some heart things, but
Okay. But you make the trip down here how often?
well, not as often as we used to.
Yeah.
4 or 5 times a year, maybe.
But no trouble driving down here?
No, I'm still. I've got most of my faculties about.
And you just turned 83.
But I don't like driving too much after dark.
No.
And
neither do I.
And but anyway, back to Ron. He eventually went to work for Intel, the microprocessor outfit, and he early on, so his employee number maybe had 2 digits, but
wow.
So he did really well. But he always loved Lagodi, and there was an article in the Sacramento paper about him. He lived in this huge home outside of Sacramento, and when Lagodi was playing, he'd call back here and have beer put the phone by the radio.
Yeah.
And he'd listen to that.
How you had to do it back then,
Yeah. And then in 2010, Carol and I traveled, and we can get to that in a little while if you want. But he came to see us. We were up in Washington State. He had a place in Oregon on the coast, and he told me he was having trouble tying his shoes. But he had some new heart medicine, so he was going to go see about that. And then he called me, I don't know, a week later and said, "It's not my medicine. I've got to bring it to him."
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And he left us in 2010, you said?
Yeah. So about 3 months later, he passed away.
Wow. What about you, Gordon? When you think about, I know you've chronicled all these things, but when you think about Lagodi and growing up, what instantly comes to your mind? What were some of the things that you just cherish as memories?
The first thing when you called me and I started thinking about some of the stuff, I thought, that can't be right. That didn't possibly happen. The coal stove, the potbelly stove, and the outhouse. Next door, my cousin lived there, my mother's sister. and we all shared that outhouse.
When did you get running water?
Uh, a pump initially that we had.
Okay. Yeah.
And then in the early 50s,
Mhm.
they put a sewer system in Lagodi somewhere, and my mom had a bathroom put in, and water.
Yeah.
Running water.
So when you start complaining about sharing a bathtub, they share the outhouse,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah, we did share that.
so it does give you a different outlook on
Yeah,
life, even
yeah.
though you have all of those amenities now, but you remember what it was like before you had those amenities, and you can appreciate
Yeah.
these things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
Carol had 6 sisters and 2 brothers, and
Your wife?
they shared
Yeah.
a bathroom.
6 sisters and 2 brothers? Yeah.
And when I think about 7 girls trying to get ready for school,
Yeah. You have to get up at 3 in the morning.
yeah, yeah.
How did you get to school? Did you walk?
We walked.
Yeah, because you were in town.
Everybody walked.
Yeah.
But it was maybe a mile. I
Mhm.
don't know.
Yeah.
Dewey Street to St. John's.
Yeah,
it wasn't bad
not far, yeah.
in the wintertime. It got a little nasty, but
You know, when I look at some of your articles and the things that I look back on, and my dad talks about too, the restaurants, the Cozy Cafe that you
Yeah.
talked about, the Arrow Cafe, and some of those, and
yeah, the Triangle.
the
Cafe.
Triangle. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many he's talked to me about this. Some I remember, some I don't. But when you go through town, I'm guessing every now and then you kind of look over and say, spend a lot of time there.
Yeah.
Where did you spend a lot of time
Yeah.
growing up?
Cozy. The
Cozy Cafe, which was where?
Which it's a Mexican restaurant now. It's
Okay,
on the
yeah.
corner.
Yeah.
It was
It was St. Vincent de Paul for a
Mill
while.
Street Grill for a while,
Yep.
I think. Yeah.
But that's where the old St. Vincent de Paul, Mill Street Grill, now Los Amigos.
Yeah.
So that's where the Cozy Cafe was.
Yeah. And we
Was that your Friday night hangout?
No, the Arrow was.
The Arrow was.
Yeah. The Cozy was. That's where I picked up my newspapers because I had paper routes.
Oh, you had a paper route, so that's where you pick your.
Yeah.
Okay. So the Arrow.
And they had a
Cafe.
pinball machine.
Yeah. So the Arrow Cafe was the Friday night
Yeah.
hangout.
Or Baker's Texaco.
Yep, right next to it.
Yeah.
Mhm. Well, how you hung out at Baker's? What'd you do at Baker's?
Nothing really other than just hang out.
Yeah.
We didn't call it that then, but
No, well, it wasn't Baker's, was it, at the time?
Well, they were just traffic back and forth
Yeah.
before we got cars and things.
Yeah.
So
Did you have a car when you could drive? When you could first drive?
when I turned 16, we bought a car. Up until then, we just
You as a family.
as
Okay.
a family.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you do the laps every Friday,
Yeah.
Saturday night?
Yeah.
Where was the lap
Well,
in Lagodi back
the
in
Red and White store, which is now the BFW,
Right.
That was a place to turn around and go back.
Turned around in that
South,
parking lot?
in the
Okay.
parking lot.
So that's as far north as you went out of town.
Yeah, unless we were wanting to listen to the radio. And if you get far enough north, up on the hills there, you could pick up KMOX and
St. Louis.
and that seemed like a whole other country.
Yeah.
In those days,
Yeah.
it was magical.
To listen to the Cardinal games? Is that why? Or just
Cardinal games. Yeah. Younger age, we went to Tater's mobile station
Where was
in
that?
the summer. It's where the marathon is now.
Okay.
That whole block, Tater's was on the west end, and the Arrow and Baker's was on the east end.
Of a block. It's
Yeah.
not like this is
It's more than block,
Yeah.
really, I guess.
Yeah.
And then in between there was a parking lot for semis.
Yeah. Okay.
Because Baker's was kind of a truck stop, but
Yeah. What stores in town did you frequent? Because I know back then you really didn't go out of town to do your
there was a
shopping.
lot of stores.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't go in. The Dooley family had like a confectionery store. You could get
Candy store.
milkshakes and banana splits, and I don't remember what years that was, but
Where'd you do your
then
grocery?
there was a blacksmith that had a place across from the Cozy, and
Okay.
we would kind of hang out.
So right around where the little credit union or toys
would
auto
be
parts?
south of the
Oh,
Cozy,
okay.
right
Oh,
across
yeah.
the street.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And Tater's was baseball. We were all baseball crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And every day you could go to Tater's and listen to the game. And there'd be people there. But local businessmen.
No, that is one place I've never heard of. Taters. Now,
Taters Mobile, Taters
now
Summers.
Nippy's, I bet you spent a little
Nippy's,
time
we
in
went
there.
to Nippy's, but we didn't go inside.
No,
My
you're,
mom would have had a heart attack.
but let me ask you this, because this is what my dad told me. So they would have inside Nippy's, they would have ticker tape.
Yes.
So they would maybe the World Series
The
or whatever.
ticker tape.
But at
And then-
Nippy's, they would then post the score out the window.
They had a whole wall
Yeah.
with 16 box score things across. There were only 16 teams in,
Right.
and 5 cities had 11 of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I could name them if you want.
No, we're good on that. Yeah.
And I think his name was Tip Downey.
Mhm.
He'd look at that ticker tape, and then he would put whatever was on the information up there, and real neat script with a chalk.
Mm-hmm.
And then out at the end of the game, if somebody hit a home run, he'd put that there. Musial, two on.
Yeah.
And we'd stand every day, and they had a little alcove-like thing,
Mm-hmm.
and we could stand and look and see that board. So we'd stop there and get scores.
And what do we do today? We pick up our phone
Yeah.
and we look. We can actually watch it.
Yeah.
Even on our phone.
Yeah.
But yeah, that had to be an exciting time, particularly around big games, World Series or,
Yeah.
or whatever it may
Yeah.
be.
And we sometimes could get it on the radio.
Now I'm guessing the Ritz Theater was kind of a
The
special
Ritz.
place for you as well.
Yeah. Saturday afternoon.
Saturday afternoon.
Especially.
What movie comes to mind instantly for you?
Lash LaRue.
I bet it was a Western. Yeah.
The Westerns.
Yeah.
Roy Rogers.
Yeah.
Gene Autry.
Yeah.
Maybe Tom Mix, although when I thought about that the other day, I thought, oh, hell, he would have been too old, but I'm not sure now.
Now, what did Gordon Grindstaff want to be when you were 10 years old? What
He
did you
wanted to be a
aspire to?
baseball player.
He wanted to be a baseball
initially.
player. Right.
But then I also wanted to be a railroad engineer.
Okay.
Those guys would come through, and that was another thing.
Mhm.
Man, hell, they're probably going to St. Louis.
Yeah.
Or Cincinnati.
Yeah.
And then somewhere around age 13, the B&O Railroad would run excursion trains, either to St. Louis or Cincinnati. I think they did one each there for 2 or 3 summers, at least, that I can remember. And we'd go to St. Louis on the train, 13, 14 years old, by ourselves. I mean, a whole
Dream
train
come
full of
true,
kids.
right?
And
Yeah.
walk to Busch Stadium,
Mhm.
whatever. Yeah, I think
It was Sportsman Park probably back then, right?
Well, Sportsman Park was there. The Brown, we didn't care about the Browns.
No.
but,
Yeah. Okay.
but there was mostly at Taters. There was mostly Cubs and the Reds and the Cardinals. Yeah.
Were you always a creative, adventurous person, always looking at the world from small town USA and saying, one day I'm going to be there?
Eventually, but not initially.
Not as a young kid.
I was
You were pleased where you were.
I was, and I was just footloose, fancy free for a while.
Yeah.
But,
About your high school years, what comes to mind instantly about your high school?
well, the first thing was I was a cheerleader.
Well, wasn't it that Father Doyle dictated that St. John's
it wasn't.
had male cheerleaders?
I think it was the whole diocese.
Okay, not just Father Doyle.
That was it was maybe an offshoot of the black patent leather shoe theory.
Okay. But let me ask you this, because I read something.
What's the black patent leather shoe theory?
I don't know. Yeah, what is that?
Well, they were very shiny shoes, and when girls wore those Mary Jane black patent leather shoes, someone noticed that maybe there might be a reflection.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Now, is that a myth or is that?
No, that's a real story.
Okay. So they said no more female cheerleaders.
Yeah. Or if they ever, of course,
They could have just
we
changed
didn't have
shoes.
any. We didn't have a basketball team until
Yeah.
1954, I think.
Yeah.
Or 55.
Actually, it was 51, but I was just reading on that because I'm
Yeah,
working,
those
on,
were
working on
the-
a little project.
The 49, 50, and 51 when they won the sectionals, and
At Lagodi.
the cousin that lived next door to me, Jack Butcher.
We know him. Yeah, he's your
Yeah.
cousin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
his mother and my mother were sisters.
So so where I was going with that, I was reading one of your articles, and it relates exactly to this, and I just thought it was really neat. Is that you had reflected on Coach Butcher being kind of a hero? You wanted to follow in his footsteps.
Yes, I did.
At St. John's, but as a freshman, the story I read, you'll remember the story I'm talking about. You, I assume it was a junior varsity game, but anyway, you were ready to get in your first game. Tell me that story and the interesting twist that happened that led you to become a cheerleader.
I think it was the freshman team.
Was it the freshman team?
I think.
But you were ready to get your name out there for St. John's Eagles.
But I couldn't. We were way behind, and Coach Watson, Zip, they called him Zip Watson, but Coach, we'll call him Coach.
Right.
He, I don't know, we were way behind, and he said, Grindstaff, you and Bill Strange get in there. I don't know, there was maybe a minute left or less, and I thought, well, maybe I can do something here to get caught up. And then when I got out there, I heard just some yelling from up in the stands, and I don't know what, but I thought, oh my God, don't throw me the ball. Please don't throw me the ball.
So while you were on the bench and going in at the scorer's bench, you had dreams of bringing your team back.
Yes, I did.
And them carrying you on your shoulders probably, and when you got in, you froze.
Yeah. So that was.
Then what happened?
We went back to the locker room. And Coach Watson said, Grindstaff, Strange, you guys didn't show me anything out there tonight. He said, why don't you do something else with your time?
Yeah, turn in your uniforms.
So we, actually, I became the student manager, and then the next year, Father Doyle approached me and said, we need some cheerleaders. I thought, no, I don't want to do that.
You didn't want to do that?
Yeah. But he finally talked me into it, and some of them.
I heard he was pretty persuasive.
Me and Johnny Hunt.
John Hunt, yeah.
And Eddie Love, which you may not know him.
I don't know Eddie Love, no.
And Tim Nante.
Oh, I know Tim Nante.
And he was only in the 8th grade.
He was an 8th grade cheerleader?
Yeah.
See, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, he was a varsity cheerleader, but he was only in the 8th grade because he
then he became
we couldn't get any other boys to do it.
Okay.
So,
wow. You got in the game free, right?
Yeah, we got to meet girls.
What do you think of that new gymnasium, St. John's there? It's pretty nice, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was.
For the time. And it was different than maybe a lot of the gymnasiums you would play that were in old schools and addressing classrooms, right, at times.
One of the people that hung out at Tater's was Buzz Cooper, and his company built that.
Cooper. Built the.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there were others. There were, Gene Dupes. He owned maybe a beer distributorship or something.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
And a guy named Spindle Pate.
Spindle Pate.
Spindle. Yeah.
Spindle.
And I don't know what. I think his sister might have been a teacher at Lagodi High School. But I'm not sure about that. And then there was also a guy named Frank Porter who took 3 or 4, my brother and I and Denny Jones, you might not know him either. But
Frank Porter, was he not the husband to Anna Mae Porter, who was the teacher? Was Anna Mae Rainey?
Yeah, he married a lady sometime later, but he took us to Cincinnati for a whole weekend, a doubleheader.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, my brother and I, and Denny Jones, and one other maybe Bobby Chandler. I don't really remember.
Again, people.
But it was really thrilling.
I mean, again, people today, it may be 1 o'clock in the afternoon and there's a 4:30 game, and I think I'll go over to St. Louis. I think I'll go over to the ball game.
Yeah.
Boy, you really had to work to get to a game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. How'd you get along with the nuns at St. John's?
Pretty good, really, for the most part.
Any nun stories you want to repeat?
No, not. Well, maybe one.
Okay.
Nothing. Just the principal, her name was, or at least when we graduated, was Sister Irma Agnes.
Sister Mary Agnes?
Irma
Okay.
Agnes.
Irma Agnes.
And she was pretty hard on you. She could be.
Well, my question is, why were you in the principal's office in the first place?
Well, she also taught.
Oh, okay, all
Anyway, we went to see her when one of my kids was little. We didn't go to see her. We just happened to be over at St. Mary of the Woods. And she was retired by then.
Okay.
And she invited us to come to lunch, and we did that. And then she took us back to her little room. And it was just not much more than a little cell, really.
Yeah.
Had a crucifix
Right.
hanging on the wall.
What kind of student were you in high school?
I was great in grade school.
What about high school?
But high school, passable. Mid range, I guess.
Yeah. Were you distracted by other things?
Other
Always
things,
wanting to do something else?
Yeah. Well, I working. Oh, that wasn't really the problem.
Were you chasing the girls a little bit in high school?
Some, but not a lot, really.
Okay.
I was pretty backward.
Where would people go, whether you or it's anybody else? But where would
sock
people?
hops? If you're going that way, sock hops.
Yeah, that's where I'm going. Okay.
They were better than any of the dating apps. And when we got a little older, the Calumet and the Rustic.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, that's where I met Carol. Was at the Calumet.
You know, it's amazing, and I mentioned that on here probably more than once. How many people I talked to have met their wife at the Calumet or the Rustic?
Yeah.
So tell me about that. She's not from here, by the way. She is over here, right?
Yeah.
Carol, but you call her Susie, or what? Her real name's Carol.
She's from Indianapolis.
Okay. What was Carol doing down here?
Well,
that's a long drive.
She was in dental assisting school with Mary Ann Zinken, a Lagodi girl.
Okay.
And she came down to visit one week with Mary Ann, and we all went to the Calumet.
Danced with her that night?
Yeah, and that's how it got started.
So when you say got started, what was that?
Well,
I mean,
that was
that was how you met.
It went. It took off pretty soon, pretty quick after that. My mom was a telephone operator.
Telephone operator. Some of you have no idea what that is.
No problem.
What was your phone number?
437W.
That's it?
Yeah.
437W.
Yeah. The Aero Cafe was 6. And that's all.
Just 6?
6.
That's easy to remember.
Yeah.
I don't even remember what you told me yours was again. Something W. But yeah. Okay.
Anyway, she kind of helped it along. She could connect us and we could talk over the phone.
All right. So how many years later now? How long
59,
have you been?
60. Actually, 60 years ago last week we met. A couple weeks
That's when
ago.
you met, 60 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we got married a year or so later after that.
Where'd you get married?
St. Patrick's Church in Indianapolis.
In Indianapolis. What did her parents think of you?
You know what? They couldn't have thought much of me because I wasn't much to offer. I didn't have much to offer, really. We were.
Yeah.
But she was a telephone operator as well as going to school, and she just happened to mention she had some AT&T stock, and I thought, I didn't even know anything about stock, but I thought, oh my God.
Okay.
And then we ended up selling that. She only had 2 shares.
Okay. So you thought you were being a gold digger, and that didn't really turn out to be.
It didn't work out. No.
But it worked out.
But yeah, it worked out. It did work out. But I think sometime in the early years, the very first couple of years, her parents probably wondered that she made a big mistake. But I had jobs, but I left here in 1963. Well, your dad and I worked down in Jasper at one of the furniture factories for 3 years, I think.
Yeah. Getting a paycheck and
it wasn't much of a paycheck, but it was. But we worked 59 hours a week.
I know. Yeah.
So and we rode. Well, your dad, I think he might have bought the car. It was an old '49 Chevrolet, I think.
I don't know. He may have, although I remember something like that. But I remember Dad. We lived on Poplar Street, and up to the highway was a little bit of a walk. Whoever drove Dad would drop him off at the highway, and he would have, the old black lunchbox, and metal lunchbox, and we'd walk up to greet him. But so I know he carpooled for a while. But they let him off at the highway. I don't know why they couldn't have driven all the way down. You know, it's another block or two.
Yeah.
But they let him off. I don't know about rainy days and cold weather, but I'll always remember that as a young child, just walking up to him. But that's where he was coming from. He was coming from work at Jasper. Novelty. That's
Yeah,
it.
novelty.
Yeah.
We made furniture.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh,
But you went to college, did you not?
no. Well, I did. I started up in Indianapolis and at IU then, then
Mhm.
it later became IUPUI.
Okay.
And now it's turning back to just IU. But,
Yeah. Yeah. That was later in life, though. So you and Carol were married. How many children do
we
you
had
have?
4 children. Our oldest, John, was born with cerebral palsy. Um, he lived to be 25.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, did not know that.
Uh, and then we had Joe and Jason, and then Julie. Uh, they're all employed.
Yeah, and how many
No, they're very nice kids.
how many grandkids do you have?
We only have 3.
That's enough. That's what I've got. That's
Yeah,
enough.
yeah. 2, Joe, our oldest son.
Mm-hmm.
He lives in Seattle.
Oh, okay.
And he has 2 children, a boy 11 and a girl 7, and he's 56 years old.
Okay. All right. Okay.
But they do it a little differently out there, I guess. I mean, he was 42 when he got married,
Mhm.
43,
Mm-hmm.
and he worked in North Carolina in the Research Triangle for a while, and he'd bring girls home from there. And I think, my God, Joe,
Yeah.
why don't you marry that woman?
Mm-hmm.
But then the Seattle thing was he went out there to visit some people and
Never came back.
never came back. No.
Well, what about yourself as far as employment? I know you worked at Jasper, but eventually, of
Yeah.
course, you ended up in the Indianapolis area. So what we know of Gordon Grindstaff, those of us who do, are mostly your writings about the town. But I don't know what you did. What'd you do for a living?
Well, initially I started out with a paper route
Okay.
when I was a little kid. You know, just jumping back to that a little bit, the town. When we moved here, it was a pretty thriving little town,
Mhm.
really, with the restaurants, and we had 3 car dealerships and lots of bars and lots of beauty parlors. And, most of the roads were still gravel.
Were they in?
Yeah, and that was one of the things when you asked me to talk. I thought back about some of that and the gravel roads and the fact that we didn't wear shoes in the summertime. I couldn't believe that. I thought, my God, that can't be possible.
Yeah.
And so I called Billy Wright. I don't
Bill
know
Wright.
if you know
Oh,
Bill.
I do. I do.
Bill,
Admire that family.
Bill's
very much.
a friend of mine, and he said, "Yeah, that's all. That's right. That's
Mhm.
right. Our feet were tough as nails."
Yeah,
And,
must have been.
and then they'd oil the roads, and you'd have to.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
uh, so anyway, I had a paper route. I delivered probably every newspaper in town except the Star. The Arvin family had the Indianapolis Star wrapped up, but the Louisville papers and both Washington papers, and they had 2 newspapers in the Indianapolis Times, and Indianapolis News. So getting back to when I moved to Indianapolis, Carl Patterson, he was the Democratic county chairman. He got me a job at the State House.
Oh, doing what?
I worked as a chemical technician. They were starting to build the interstate system, and I tested the cement samples before they would use them, make sure they were strong enough to hold the traffic.
Well, apparently it worked.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I guess.
Sometimes, yeah. I was there, less than a year because I didn't make hardly anything.
Mhm.
And then the Democrat Party took 2% of that. So, they don't do that anymore. So I got a job as a insurance inspector, which when somebody would apply for insurance, the insurance company would contract with us, and we'd go out and see like if they're if it was fire insurance, if it was a fire worthy, or car insurance, you'd knock on the door and ask the neighbors if the guy drank or that kind of stuff. Really nosy stuff.
Yeah, but it's insurance, right? Yeah.
And so the company I worked for opened an office in Lansing, Michigan, and so I went up there, and we got paid by the number of inspections we did, and they didn't have any business up there, so we didn't make any money. And we went up there in November, and we couldn't find any place to rent. We'd only been married 6 months, I think, and we didn't have any furniture. We finally found a house out on the edge of town, Lansing, because the college was there. So we rented that house. It had 2 or 3 bedrooms, and it was just us. We had a card table, and there was a refrigerator. No, there was no refrigerator. So we used one of the bedrooms of the refrigerator. I opened the window.
Air conditioning.
And you could adjust the window to keep the temperature, but we only lasted about 3 months there. The car I drove quit, a Volkswagen, and
tough times.
Yeah, so we stuck our tail between our legs, and I took the bus back to Indianapolis and borrowed my father-in-law's car, went back up and got lonely. And that's when I thought, oh boy, they probably really wanted. Mm-hmm. So then I came back and got a job at the Indianapolis Times, which I really liked.
Newspaper.
The newspaper.
Yeah.
But it only lasted maybe a little over a year in the paper.
What did you do there?
I was the advertising service manager, which my job was to lay out the paper, the advertisements, and that's what controlled the size of the paper.
Okay.
I don't think they paid extra, but it was always better if their ad was above the fold in the paper. And my boss had favorites and he was a tyrant. So
you left there.
I walk in there on one Monday morning, and he threw the Sunday paper at me. Yeah, because I had put an ad somewhere that he didn't want.
What was your reaction?
I'm sorry.
What was your reaction?
Well,
did you throw it back at him?
No, I didn't.
No?
I knew the job we had. We had one child maybe then, and
so you needed the job. So
yeah, so I had to just keep up. Mm-hmm. I didn't make much there. So after that, I got a job at RCA, again as a chemical technician in the lab.
Indianapolis?
In Indianapolis. Okay. We were developing magnetic tape for 8-tracks. And
now you're getting in on the
and,
technical side,
and also computer tape. Mm-hmm. We developed several different formulas, and I mostly just tested stuff. And then when one of the formulations went production, they made me a production foreman for the third shift.
Mm-hmm. I've been there.
Have you? Yeah. Well, that didn't go very well. I had about 35 or 40 women, and I'm not picking on women.
He's picking on you, women.
And they would inspect the tape. They had these machines. When they go through there, they would look for imperfections and stuff. And
they would find some.
And I was 25 or 26 years old, naive, and they'd come up and tell me they needed a health break, and I had no idea what that meant. Okay. And there was no way I was going to ask.
I'm only guessing right now, but I can imagine.
So I did that for a year, and we made really good money because we worked a lot of hours. Mm-hmm. So. And we bought a house up in Lawrence, actually. Yeah. It was a national home that the VA had repossessed it, and so we bought it for a little bit of nothing down.
But now you're moving. You got your own home.
Now I've got our own home.
And now you feel like you're established a little bit.
So the tape business really didn't take off, and I could see that while they were laying off people, um, the loudspeaker would click on and say, Bill, Bill, whatever your name was, can you come up front? And
Uh-oh,
he'd
not
go,
good news.
yeah, not
No.
good. And he'd come, he said, and he came back and said, I just got laid off. And then that loudspeaker would click again. John, would you please come up?
Really?
It was, yeah. And they didn't get me, but
Yeah.
I could see the writing on the wall. So I had a friend, um, Denny Phillips, who was from Lagodi. Him and his brother both played for Jack, Gordon Phillips and Denny Phillips. And he was a recruiter. Uh, and he called me about a job at a national starch company, which was, they made, well, they took corn and made all kinds of stuff with it, starch and dog food. Uh, and they needed a foreman. So I went to there and it was even worse there. I mean, it was the Oil and Atomic Workers Union, and them guys ate me alive. That's just, and I called him and said, I can't do this. And he said, you got to stay 90 days so I can get my commission.
Yeah.
So
Did
I
you?
stayed 90
Yeah.
days. And then I went to a company called PR Mallory. Took a big pay cut, huge pay cut. And our second child was born. That was Joe, 1967, 68. And I went to my boss and I said, I've got to have a raise. And he said, I can't get you a raise, but I can get you a part-time job.
More hours. Yeah.
So he did. And he and I split the evening shift at the 500 Club at Tindon Bar. He'd work one night and I'd work the next one. And I did that for the next 6 or 7 years and worked at Mallory. And my job there was to, they make capacitors. That was part of their company. And my job was to custom fit the capacitor to whatever the customer needed. And the engineering department computerized some of that work. And they came to me and said, we can probably hire a programmer maybe, but he's not going to know anything about the capacitor business. And we think it would be better if we just made you a programmer. And because you know the business. And so that's when I started doing that in 1969 or 70.
Sounds like that was kind of a first break for you professionally,
big
right?
break. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was. And I stayed there about 5 years, and then the job opportunities exploded. They just exploded. I was getting calls from recruiters every day. And I finally got one at Kimball. And I went there in 1976.
And where?
Yeah,
Kimball and Jasper.
Kimball and Jasper.
Okay.
And we had just built a house in Mooresville. Well, outside of Mooresville, we bought 5 acres, and I was going to be a gentleman farmer. Actually, and we built it ourselves. So, and it wasn't done completely. I still had trim to do and things like that. So, and I traveled back and forth. I stayed down there some nights during the week. I rented a room for a lady, just an old lady that was single. And I did that for over a year, well, almost maybe 2. I was there when Elvis died. I do remember. So that was in '77.
Right.
And our kids they were in school and they didn't want to move. And Carol she didn't want to live in Lagodi. Not that there's anything wrong with Lagodi, but she was just a city girl.
Sure. Yeah.
So I went back and I went to work for a contracting company, IT, and I did that for the next 25 years.
That was your last job?
Yeah. And I went out on my own for a while.
What company was that?
It was just a small company, Daniels Associates.
Daniels.
It's still functioning, but most of those places that sprung up are gone. But I worked at well, I worked at all the banks. Indianapolis used to have 4 national banks, but Merchants and American Fletcher, Indiana National. I can't remember the other ones, but they're all gone. But I worked at all of those at one time or another. I worked at Eli Lilly for probably 13 of those 25 years, mostly in marketing, but some in HR, payroll systems. I worked on several payroll systems. It seemed like every time they got a new HR director, he wanted his own payroll system. So, but maybe that was just my imagination.
No, it's probably right. Probably right. So you retired then from where?
Well, we didn't retire either one of us. Carol, well, of course, she stayed home when the kids were little, but then she's very artistic. So she worked in a little craft shop in Mooresville and taught different painting, that kind of stuff. But the last 15 years or so, when she worked, she was the director of a handicap or a workshop for handicapped adults for about 15 years. So at the end of 2001, my contract was running out at Lilly, and I was 61 and change. So we thought, well, you can quit your job, even though she didn't want to, and we'll just do something else for a while. And if we don't like it, we can just go back to work. So in 1991, with my prostate cancer, after we had that operation, we took a month off and went to the West Coast. We took a train out to Seattle. Joe wasn't there yet, but and then we rented a car in Seattle and drove clear down the coast to Los Angeles, and then took the train back home. And we loved it.
So is that where you first started thinking about chronicling your adventures?
Yeah.
Because I know it was around the 2001 timeframe or 2002 when it went to the newspapers up there, but all along, were you chronicling these things in some sort of journal, or did it come later?
No, they just actually, when I was working at RCA in the 60s or early 70s, I wrote for a newspaper, a weekly newspaper. I wrote kind of a humor column. And
what newspaper was that?
It was a Northeast Press or something, or something. It was not a big paper. I don't know what the circulation was, but and then I wrote a column. We went to a different restaurant every week, and the column was called "Chewing Out," and I did reviews of restaurants and stuff.
Okay.
And we got free meals out of it.
As long as you said good things about it.
Yeah. So, but there wasn't enough money to do it full time. So that was.
That's kind of where it started, though.
Yeah. I first started writing stuff. Writing love letters to Carol.
You mean actually
I noticed
writing?
then that I might have a talent in that regard. You know,
Had a way with words.
In school, we didn't even have a yearbook in school or that kind of stuff. So they had the green and white spotlight that they put in the paper every week, but some girl did that. So I mean, I never really. I won't say I had the opportunity, but I loved to read back then. Read detective novels about a detective called Shell Scott.
But writing wasn't something that was something you always wanted to do.
No, but I sure like those detective novels.
Well, how did you get? It was the Mooresville.
The Mooresville paper
was the first one. Well, how did they become aware of your writings and approach you about that?
Back to when we decided to quit working, we sold our house. But we kept 3 acres. Sold the house and 2 acres, and I built a barn back in the back of that with 3 acres, and we bought an RV, a fifth wheel in a Dodge pickup truck. I bought them off the internet, I think, uh, from a guy down in North Carolina. And at the time, Joe was working in Raleigh. So he went and looked at it and said, and it was brand new, both of them. The guy and his wife had bought, they were going to go travel, and the wife died. And so he just sold it. And so we bought that. And then I started sending stuff back to people.
Okay.
And the editor of the Mooresville paper got a hold of one of them and called me.
When you say sending stuff back to people and the editor got a hold of it, who are you sending them back to? That
All friends and kids, our kids.
Okay.
And,
okay, but in a small town it gets around, so it got to the
around
newspaper.
Mooresville. And he liked it, and he wanted to know if I could do that every week. And
your first
well,
thought
I
was
could maybe for a couple months. But,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's a lot to ask.
And they published twice a week, and so I actually wrote 2 a week for.
So at that time, were you talking about your hometown growing up, or more about your RV travels?
More about the RV travel.
Okay, that's how it started.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then as time went on, and I needed more stuff to write about. Our very first trip west, we went to Arizona, and our granddaughter, our daughter was pregnant at the time, and we had planned to be back in June in time for the birth. But Julie, our daughter, came down with eclampsia, which is something that happens sometimes to pregnant women. Her blood pressure went sky high, and her kidneys were. And our son-in-law called us and said that she was in the hospital, but not to worry. They just told us she'd have to stay on bed rest for the next 3 months. And then, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 hours later, he called back and said they're transferring her to the IU hospital. And then it just went downhill from there. And by the next morning, he called and said they're going to take the baby. And they've got something on her kidneys have failed, and it was terrifying stuff. So we threw everything in the back of the truck and hooked up because Carol lost her driver's license, and this was right after the 9/11 stuff, and she couldn't get on a plane.
Oh, okay.
So we really didn't have any choice. So we hooked that thing up and took off for home. And we had a cell phone then, but it didn't work some of the times, and so and we were close to the border, the Mexican border, for part of that trip, and the cell phone kept picking up the Mexican towers. And well, I wasn't worried about the cost, but you couldn't get through some of the times.
Right.
But it took us about 40 hours, I think, to drive it. And it was constant phone calls. So we'd stop, use a pay phone. What's happening now? What's happening now? And my son, Jason, who was also he was home. He was right there with him. So
how did it turn out?
Turned out okay.
Okay.
He called.
Okay.
Jason called.
You had me sweating there for a minute. Yeah.
He called us at, I don't even know where we were. Well, we were in Dallas, and there was an ice storm, and we had to stop because we couldn't go any farther. And we stopped for the night, and we just prayed the rosary, and finally Jason called me. He said they're taking her to the operating room now, and then he called back. And he called back a little while later and said, "She's here."
This was your first grandchild?
It was a she, yeah. She said, "Everything's good. Everything looks good. Julie's blood pressure's gone down, And he said, "I'm not going to tell you her name." He said, "I'll let Julie do that." So a few hours later, we got up and I went outside. I thought I would go take a shower, and I couldn't. The door was frozen shut, the shower door. Uh, well, there's a story in one of those books about that. There was more to it, but the rest, I finally did get in there. And
What was the child's name?
the girl's name, her name was Riley, or
Right.
is Riley Marie. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
She, they said it, they didn't name her Riley, but that's Riley Hospital's where she spent the
Okay.
first 3 months of her life. So
And so Riley today is 21, 22
21.
years old,
She's
right?
21. She just turned 21.
Okay. Wow. So we talked, you mentioned a book. So you're an author as well.
Yes.
In
Yeah.
fact, I saw where you can still buy those on Amazon or.
You can get them on Amazon.
Right.
I don't. Well, I still get a little check
Do you?
about every quarter. Sometimes it's only $2.
Yeah. From just people buying those books?
Yeah.
So you don't-
I think probably the first one more than the other two.
So you just get a little bit of what that book.
Yeah.
If I would buy that book for $14,
Yeah, $20 really, or 19 something. Maybe. Well, now maybe it is. But
What would you get?
initially it was 19.
and how much would you get from
I
that?
got $2.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
You better
So-
start buying because $2 doesn't go as far
Yeah,
as it used
no.
to, right?
No.
But,
And initially
yeah.
the checks would be 50, 60.
So writing for a newspaper column was one thing, but sitting down and I guess maybe what you did, right, was just taking the collection of those
Yes,
and
that's
putting in
exactly.
those. I think you have 3 books out.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, and that was it. I'd expand on some of them
Mhm.
because I wasn't limited to mine.
So it wasn't just the Mooresville paper. Tell me where else people would read these
Well,
columns.
then the Martinsville paper, of course, picked it up because they were both
Mooresville
owned.
right next to Martinsville. Okay.
And the
Did they own?
Lagodi,
Did
the
they own
Lagodi
that?
paper,
What paper?
the Lagodi
Yeah.
paper.
How did that come out? About.
Well, I saw Larry Henry at one of the alumni meetings
Mhm.
and talked to him about it, and he said, "Well, we can try it." He said, "I don't have a lot of money to give you, but."
Mhm.
And he did. Well, it was enough. It was enough. I mean, it was.
Yeah,
Enough.
yeah.
I wasn't in it for the money.
No,
Actually.
but if you should have it anywhere, it should be here.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. And that's when
Because people
that's
can
when a
relate
lot
to
of
it.
Lagodi stories started
Yeah.
popping up.
Okay.
The well, all that stuff.
Well, how difficult though was it from week to week to know that I've got to get this in and I've got another story to tell? What else can I think of? Did that come easy to you?
It did, and that's for probably the first 15 years.
15 years. Wow.
But then the last 5.
Well, you run out of stories. It's a small town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's.
Mhm.
I mean, when I'd go back and look at that, like the no shoes.
Yeah.
We had I couldn't believe it actually, so I called Bill. Well, I told you that.
Yeah.
Right. And he
Verified that. Yeah.
he one time we went to the theater, the Ritz Theater, on Tuesday evening. That they had a movie called The Thing, and I was 11, and my brother Ron was 9.
Yeah. A little intense.
And
Huh?
Tuesday nights was a good night because they had a drawing for money.
Yeah.
I don't know if your dad ever told you about that.
Well,
but-
we used to have a drawing for I think free tickets maybe, but
Well, yeah, I don't know how much money. Well,
Yeah.
you had to register, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
And Henry Jones, I don't know if you knew.
Oh,
Henry.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, he'd do the drawing.
Real deep voice.
Yeah, real deep voice. And
Didn't even need a microphone, I'm sure.
yeah, you can, but
Mhm.
he had the same spiel. Something about John Holmes is not registered or is not at the movie or is not
Mhm.
registered as being present. So
Yeah.
next week's drawing will be. But after that thing was the most scary movie that I'd ever been
The Thing.
to see in my life.
Mhm.
The original was, well, of course when we went in it was daylight, but we came out it was dark because because Indiana used to be on Central Time.
Yeah.
That's one of my pet peeves. But so my brother Ron, we had to walk home, and the thing behind the movie, The Thing, it got its energy from drinking blood, and also, well, we spent most of the movie under the seats.
Yeah.
But I had the idea also that he'd hook into the electrical grid and he drove that way. Well, so when we walked home, we had to go down West Main Street to where it then turns and goes down across the tracks. And right there on the right side was the big electrical transformer.
Mm-hmm.
It's still there.
You never know,
actually.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought that thing could be in there sucking. I said, electricity.
The imagination.
And I was scared of him, and we're barefooted and walking in that gravel.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, Ronnie screamed. And I thought the thing had grabbed him.
Mm-hmm.
And I took off running, and then I thought, wait, I can't. My mom, I can't go home without him.
No, you got to bring
So
him.
I
You
turned
got to
around,
bring him with you.
and he screamed because he had stepped on a snail.
Oh.
And his bare feet.
Nothing grabbed him.
No, he stepped on that snail and it squished up between his toes. And it.
Well, the imagination. My dad has told the story. He lived right up here on Park Street. So whether it was at a movie or just out, but every time. Remember, it was around World War II. So the Germans and the U.S.
Yeah.
So he would go down this bridge right down the road here. There's a bridge, and he was afraid that the Nazis might come out and grab it. I mean, just what the imagination does for you whenever you see the movies or hear these things on the radio as an 11-year-old kid.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The Nazis scared me too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, how could they not at that age, right?
Yeah.
What you were told about them and what you heard on the news.
Yeah.
But that theater. I mean, it's just a shame that you can't have something like that in town anymore. But a lot of memories.
By the way, Jack popcorn there.
Jack Butcher, yeah.
Yeah. And the theater had it had the lobby area there where you bought your tickets, and then there was a lobby after you pass the popcorn machine, and then there was 2 aisles of doorways on each side, and then there was a couple of windows cut into the wall that had curtains over them, but you could open the curtains and see if you were out in the lobby. But you could also open the curtains and look over to see who was in the back 2 or 3 rows of seats, because couples
that's where the action took place. Yeah, they didn't watch the thing.
Yeah.
No.
So
you did that occasionally?
Like the drive-in theaters.
So you watched occasionally?
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
I mean, I wasn't very old. I didn't really
You're
know
just
what
interested.
they were doing, but
right, you're just interested.
And the drive-in theaters were the same way.
So any other newspapers? Martinsville, Mooresville, Lagodi.
Mooresville, Lagodi. And then I had one in Spain, which
Spain.
We one winter. Well, we spent a winter, lots of winters in Florida, but we were at a party with some friends who were from England. They were pretty well to do, so they spent part of their year down on the Mediterranean coast in Spain, and they had invited a guest from there who actually worked for a newspaper, an English language paper in Spain that catered to the British. And we talked, and she wanted to read some of my stuff, and I showed it to her.
Was it mostly the small town stuff, or everything that you had?
Just whatever I had, yeah. And it was.
So you didn't really have to think up things for them. These were things that you
I just sent them what. And sometimes the interpretation didn't go too well, I think. But
I can imagine.
But I'd get mail occasionally from people wanting to know what exactly. And I got a lot of mail when I quit doing it. But
when and why did you quit?
Well, the papers finally gave
kind of a financial
the Gannett group. They bought the Mooresville and Martinsville paper, and of course the Lagodi paper was already gone.
Yeah.
So I didn't really have an outlet. Plus, I just didn't have time.
Didn't have any more stories, probably.
I didn't have any more stories.
Yeah. Did you miss it, or was it a relief?
It was a relief.
It was a relief.
Yeah, because the last year or so, I would just have to grapple with something to come up with 700 or 800 words. And I mean, mostly they were the truth. Some of them were kind of reused and bringing up to date.
So that was a terrific hobby for years for you.
Yeah.
But when you stopped doing that, your mind still has to do something and a creative outlet in
Yeah.
some source.
Yeah.
What is that for you today?
Well, as it turns out, it happens about the time that Carol was diagnosed with vascular dementia.
Mm-hmm.
So um, that takes up most of my time.
Mm-hmm.
So um, that's my major outlet. Um, we used to remodel. We had some rental properties over the years.
Mm-hmm.
One of my bartending jobs was a slow night. There was a guy in there from, I don't know where he was from actually, but we were talking about retirement, and I wasn't really that old then, but I didn't, since I worked for myself or with this small company, we didn't have any kind of retirement plans.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "What you need to do is get in real estate." uh, so we bought a small fourplex on the north side, across from the Heron Art School, and it's kind of a diverse neighborhood. So we had some diverse renters
Mm-hmm.
of all kinds. Enough really to fill a book. I've started it 3 or 4 times.
Do you still do that today?
And at the beginning of every year, I think I got to get back on that and get that done. Because there were some really great stories. Awful times for us, but great stories.
Yeah. Do you chronicle your wife's journey with dementia?
A little bit, but not. I've written some things that I probably should send somewhere to.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking, experiencing that might be able to help some people, as they deal with it. Since you have that experience. How's she doing today?
She's doing okay. I mean, we're just day to day. It's it's been 8 years at least.
8 years? Okay.
Yeah, she first had a problem about three days before she turned 65. That was 16 years ago. Most of it was brought about by blood clots, I think. She had something called transient ischemic attacks, TIAs.
Yep, I'm familiar with that.
Okay. And she had several of them over the years until to the point where.
Well, so she's taken good care of you over time. So
yeah.
you can take care of her,
right? I mean, she made me who I am. I mean, when I was not always suave and debonair.
Not always, I'm sure.
If I was just a hillbilly to come out of the woods of southern Indiana. And actually, I probably still am.
Yeah. Well, suspenders and hat, and you're right at home. That's for sure. Yeah. How often do you get home? I know you said on occasion, but I think you had mentioned genealogy, that you're sort of
genealogy
into that. Do you come here to the library to do a lot of that?
I came down. Well, I've got Ancestry on my computer, and then the Mormons have a family search webpage that is really good.
Yeah, and what have you found that's been most interesting so far?
Well, my great-great-grandparents who came to Dover Hill were Quakers from the Pennsylvania area, eastern Ohio, and they were pretty well to do. They had a big farm up there, and then my great-grandmother, she was a Davis. She married a Kennedy, and they had farms up Crane. Actually, if you ever look at, I think I read somewhere that 160 farms their families were displaced when the government started buying all that property, and they all had their 40 acres or 75 acres.
Yeah, and your family was one of those.
And this Davis family had 250.
Oh wow! Yeah.
But her husband died at a young age. My great grandmother, and then my grandmother's husband died at a young age, and then my mom's husband died at a young age. He was 37. But all those women, they just kept at it. And,
Yeah, I've often thought, I know that it would be interesting. I've just never pulled the trigger yet, but it sounds like it's probably something that once you get into it, you want to keep
oh
digging,
yeah,
right?
yeah, you do, and it's it takes a lot of time, and you can go down rabbit holes
Yeah.
and 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 not come out of there the other end. I mean, I traced that family back, the Davis family, way back into England and Wales. But it got Davis is a very common name, and so and then they used to name their boys after the kings. So there's a lot of Henrys and a lot of that kind of stuff.
So what is it that we haven't talked about that you'd like to, that maybe I didn't ask, that you had planned on talking about? Anything at all that you want to throw out there? Because I know when you leave here, you're going to say, Carol, I wish I would have, I planned on saying that, but I didn't. And you will, that's okay. But yeah.
I completely forgot about the planer mill, although that's not something to bring up. But between the planer mill, when they had a horn that they blew in the mornings at 6:45
here in Lagodi.
In Lagodi.
Oh yeah,
so
for breaks
so the
and
workers,
lunch.
And then they blew it again at 7, and I think at noon or 1:45 or whatever the lunch hour was.
Yeah.
And then the church had the Angelus, which they rang the bells at noon and at 6:00, and you're supposed to say a prayer. I don't know.
St. John's Church, right?
So in those years, we pretty much knew what time it was all the time.
Yeah, so the time by the church and by the planer mill.
And today, of course,
didn't need a watch.
I'm an old curmudgeon, and I could probably, I mean, if you get me started on the phones and that kind of stuff. And
you mean just?
And my granddaughter is, she's 21, and she's a very nice girl, and it's hard. I mean, relationships. I don't. You have to use your phone for everything.
I know. What do you think about that?
I think it's stupid. I mean, and I don't know. You know, between the sock hops and the Calumet and those kind of things, or even the Easter egg hunts. Do they have Easter egg hunts here anymore?
Yes, they do. Yes.
The Legion used to have a big one.
Yeah, there's actually there's several of them around.
Yeah.
But I know what you're saying. Those were really big things back then. Yeah.
But they were big deals back then.
I remember over at the park and up at Costello Field, the fairgrounds, and it was. Yeah. You're looking for that golden egg that I never found, but somebody did, and they got $5 or whatever it was.
And I always swore I walked right over it.
Yeah, probably so. Yeah. But those were times. It sounds like though you were very fond of.
But mostly, I'm just happy I'm still here. I mean, a lot of my friends aren't. And I miss that part of it. Or even my family, especially with this genealogy stuff. I think, damn, I wish I had somebody to ask about this.
And you did at one time, but you didn't take advantage of it.
No, I didn't. I sure didn't.
So take advantage of it. Again, that's why we do some of these things, so that in this case, Gordon's family down the road can find out. If they don't know anything about Gordon then, they will now, right? I mean, almost every aspect's out there. But I preached this before, but I hope that you take advantage of, if it's an elderly person or not, but somebody that you feel like, I wish I would have asked this person that question about their childhood or growing up. Do it. Get it on video. Record them. But do something. And like you said, you won't regret it a little bit later. You know, even your parents, I'm sure you'd love to know more about them, even though now you're able to dig in a little bit. But not about some of the small things like you're able to tell people, right?
And I'll give you an example of one of those things. That baby that was born after my dad died, my mom never gave it a name. It was a boy.
Okay.
I called him Jimmy Ray.
Yeah. Why?
Just when the kids in my neighborhood, like Tommy Walker, he would have been about the same age.
Tom Walker,
yeah. as that boy, and when things happened to him, his graduation or that kind of thing. I think.
Yeah, but you just randomly
Jimmy
gave it
Ray.
a name, Jimmy Ray.
No, that there was no name. And I asked my mom about it one time. She said it was just such a hectic time that we couldn't. I just didn't have time to even think about that.
And it was a different time.
And then somewhere along the line, I got to wondering about if the baby was stillborn because of the accident or because of something else, and how far along was that baby? And I didn't have anybody to ask. Jack didn't remember, and he sometimes I could ask him stuff. He knew my dad much better than me.
Yeah.
So I went looking for the baby's birth certificate, and I finally found it down in Davis County. And Doc Ladd again. Doc Ladd delivered that baby, and there's both a birth certificate and a death certificate, but there was no weight put in the little box for that kind of stuff. And I'm not picking on Dave, or not Dave, but Doc Ladd, Dave, if he's watching. He was a busy man, you know. Yeah, he came to our house when I had some, I don't know, not smallpox, but chicken pox or one of those. Yeah, and he could do all that home stuff. Now I don't know how he ever had time.
I don't either.
And when I first had to go see a doctor, when I got older, I couldn't believe they didn't make house calls.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, but if you think about it today, you understand there's no way.
Yeah.
And it probably wouldn't be safe today, you know.
And so I never did find out that, and I probably never will now. When my mom died in 1976, in Vera, we were cleaning out her effects and those kind of things, and she said, we need a new headstone. My dad had a military headstone. She said, we need one for both of them. So she said, I'll get it. I'll make arrangements if you guys pay for it. So Ronnie and I did that. And she called me about, I don't know, 6 months later. And you know, Vera, of course, she didn't. And her language got a little salty sometimes.
Sometimes.
When our son-in-law.
Even from the kitchen sometimes.
When we first took our son-in-law down to meet her at the restaurant, we had no more than got in there. And of course, Vera, one of her favorite things to call people was dumb, blankety blank. That had to do with a donkey. Anyway, we had sat down in the restaurant, and Vera stuck her head out of the kitchen and said, which one of you dumb blankety blanks ordered pork chops? You know we don't serve pork chops at lunch. And some guy held up his hand and said, I did, I'm sorry. And the dumb blankety blank waitress don't know any better. So,
and we complain about customer service today.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter to Vera, right? I mean, the food was good. So you were going to sit there and eat it. Take it.
It was good.
But
so she called me and said that we've got the headstone in. I want you to come down and look at it. And so I did. I came down, picked her up, and we went out there. And it's a nice headstone if you go out to Goodwill. Look at it. And on the front it had my dad's name and his birth date and my mom's. And she said, come around here and back and look. And it says, our children, Vera Rose, we all use a middle name, Gordon Lee and Ronald Dale, and Peter Bernard. And I looked at it for a minute and I said, who the hell is Peter Bernard?
Yeah.
She said, that was that baby. And I said, well, you can't give him a name. She said, oh, I did.
You mean when they got the headstone, she just gave him a name?
Yeah, she gave him a name.
Without asking you or anybody else?
Yeah, well, it made me mad because I wanted to be called Jimmy Ray, first of all.
Yeah.
And I said, you can't do that. She said, I guess I can.
And did.
And I said, we don't even know anybody named Peter Bernard. She said, well, Uncle Bernard, for one, and only the first pope, you dumb blankety blank.
You know.
And so,
we talk about.
So it's there.
We talk about doing these things with people in heaven. Now with Vera, you'd have to edit out a lot, but wouldn't that be an interesting little sit down, right?
Yeah, it would. or even my brother. I miss them both.
Yeah.
It's but they've had decent lives,
Absolutely.
and we certainly have. It could have went the other way just as easily.
Yeah.
I don't want to keep talking all day,
No.
but here, I don't know, 2 or 3 years back, I was cleaning out our garage, and I had a whole bunch of canning jars.
Canning jars? Okay.
Yeah, and I put them in the paper or put them somewhere, an ad for $20, and a woman called me and said, "I'd like to have those. I've never canned before, but I'm going to start." So I said, "Okay," and she said, "I don't have the $20 a day, but I'll get it for you on Friday, and I'll pick them up." And then she called me on Friday and said, "I can't come. My car won't start." I said, "Well, I can bring them to you." And she gave me her address. It was over on the west side of Indianapolis in a really rundown area. And so I drove over there, and she lived in a little apartment that was kind of attached to the back of an old double, and it was a rundown. And outside the stoop on this apartment was a little tomato plant that was this brawny looking tomato plant. Now I had 50 canning jars or something. And she came out and she said, "Well," I said, "where do you want these?" And she said, "I can put them in the house." And I put them in just this little thing. And there was no way she was ever going to be able to can them.
Right.
But I left her the jars and I didn't take the $20.
Yeah.
And then I drove around the neighborhood and I thought, that could have been me without a couple of breaks that I had, or if I hadn't had quite the aptitude or the energy that I needed to do better.
Things turned out okay, didn't it?
Yeah.
Thanks for coming down.
Thanks for having me.
And it's great meeting you, by the way. Never met Gordon Grindstaff. G2, right?
Yeah.
In his articles, Gordon Grindstaff, G2. Go ahead. You were going to say something?
Yeah. No.
Nope. Okay.
I'm all done.
But I've enjoyed those over the years. So you've got, if they want to say, well, I've never seen these because it's been a little while. First of all, you can go to his Facebook page, and I know he's got several of them. But you've got a website, do you not? Is it Gordon?
I do. My daughter set it up.
Yeah.
And I had a weblog which I used to use a lot, but I haven't in the last.
But what is it? It's Gordon Grindstaff. Is it .com?
It's Gordon Grindstaff.
If you Google Gordon Grindstaff, that's what I did.
It's
you can bring them up, and you might even find one of your family members mentioned in there from a few years ago.
I didn't even get to Murray Stuckey.
Well, go ahead. Talk about Mo Murray.
Murray was he worked with me and your dad at the novelty, and we all rode in that old black. That's what we called that Chevrolet.
Yeah.
And Murray and I worked in the same department. We worked on a glue spreader that put tops on tables.
Oh yeah.
And we'd pick him up in the mornings, and he might just be getting home. But sorry, Murray.
So do you see Murray when you come back to town a lot?
Yeah. He was a good friend. Of course, I haven't seen him for a long time, but those were good years. Yeah. Really, I mean, we didn't make much, but when you work all day and there was all men in there, the restrooms were just out right on the one wall there. There weren't any stalls or anything like that. And one day a woman showed up there looking for a job, and everybody was, "Oh my God, what
are we going to do now?"
Not going to,
Well, things progress.
We'd stop in Hayesville on the way home and have a schooner of beer, and get home and at sometimes 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night, and you still have time to go to Frank's Tavern and have a boiled egg.
So you work all day. You're tired. You stop in Hayesville for a drink.
Yeah.
You get home. Got to be bars open, right?
Yeah.
So you attend a few, right? Yeah. But you bartended, you said.
I did. Well, not here. Well, I did some for beer later years, but and I love that bartending. I mean, it was the conversations I could dish out all kinds of advice.
I bet. Yeah. You can have your own little show.
Yeah, and and it was actually pretty lucrative. We did a lot of. I worked at the convention center and lots of those kind of things.
Yeah, good little side gig.
A private thing that for Lily they bring in doctors and or medical
Mhm.
students and treat them to a couple of days and
Yeah.
food and drink. And,
All right. Well, our best to you and your lovely wife.
yes.
Yes.
Well,
And,
thanks again.
well, thank
Greg.
you so much, especially for coming down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's Gordon Grindstaff. Again, you can go just Google Gordon Grindstaff, and yeah, there's funny stories. There's just interesting stories, not just about Lagodi, but about his travels, and I think you'll enjoy them. So we appreciate Gordon coming down and finally meeting him. Like I said, I've read some of his articles, but haven't met him. So thank you for watching this edition with Gordon Grindstaff on Getting to Know Your Indiana Neighbor.